Put yourself in position to win big on Kentucky Derby Day with the power of daily racing form. Visit shop.drf.com and get past performances, expert picks, betting strategies, clock reports, and more. Again, that's shop.drf.com.
Hey everyone, David Aragona and Craig Milkowski here, taking a look at the feature race on Friday at Churchill Downs. It is the Grade 1 Kentucky Oaks for the 3-year-old fillies going the 1 1/8 distance on the dirt course at Churchill. And Craig, no surprise to see a full field signed on. This is always a race that connections want to participate in. The field, unlike the Derby, limited to 14 runners. We do have 3 drawn on the also eligible list. And something we've talked about, Craig, on our podcast, and I know privately, this is not the fastest group of 3-year-old fillies that we've ever seen before. So there's definitely a defined favorite here in Wet Paint, but it's not like she or anybody else is earning speed figures that make her unbeatable in this spot.
No, that's for sure. It's a race that the speed figures have come back a little disappointing almost every time I've sat there to do them. These races are often, almost always run on the same day that the Colts run. So there's always usually something similar to compare it to. And it just hasn't been a great group. But that said, that makes it more of a handicapping challenge and probably led to the full field with all the also eligibles because everyone thinks they have a shot and you can't really argue with them.
And the way the point situation has worked out to qualify for the Kentucky Oaks, it's left some horses that I think people might have liked on the outside looking in. And if we could just throw up those also eligible entrants one more time, I think this is the opportunity to talk about them. Horses like Taxed, Julia Shining, and to a much lesser extent, Hoosier Philly. I mean, Craig, horses like Julia Shining in particular, and Punch Bowl, who wasn't even entered for this race, get excluded based on points. I think they're horses that would have added some quality to this field. But as we're recording this on Thursday, no scratches have been announced yet, so it seems unlikely that these horses are going to get to participate.
Yeah, it doesn't seem so. And Julia Shining would be one I would probably have been interested in at 1 1/8 and given her development. But as you said, I think those announcements have to come today. It can't be tomorrow. So it would have to be sooner rather than later. And it looks like the original 14 are probably going to be in.
Yeah, for me, Taxed is a horse that I would include if she were to draw into this race with one defection, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen as of right now on Thursday morning. So before we get into the contenders, Craig, let's take a look at some TimeformUS features, including, of course, the TimeformUS pace projector for this Kentucky Oaks. And we do have some speed signed on, particularly in the form of the number 10 Flying Connection, who seems like the most likely front runner in here. She's shown some speed in her prior 2-turn races at Sunland Park. So you'd imagine her connections are going to go forward, but there are some others in here who want to be tactically placed up close to the pace. So I think the pace projector is correct that this is a pace that could heat up on the front end.
Yeah, the big field's always going to help with that. There are some quick ones. You mentioned Flying Connection, the 12 horse Darth Vader, who is shown in second on that pace projector, has shown some high speed even around 1 turn. So I would be pretty surprised if things aren't hot on the front end.
And as we've been doing all year, we'll also check out the TimeformUS finish projector for this race, one of the new features in TimeformUS that has just launched on DRF.com. And in your DRF mobile PPs, you can check out the finish projector by just toggling over from the pace projector. And Craig, this is heavily weighted on the speed figures and the pace projection. So not a big surprise to see the 2 Brad Cox trainees shown in front, the number 6 Botanical and the number 7 Wet Paint. They are the 2 horses with the best speed figures on the way in.
Yeah, the one thing to keep in mind is Botanical earned hers on synthetic tracks. That's something we don't really differentiate between surfaces very much for the power picks. And in this case, we wouldn't have any other option because she's never run on the dirt before.
And you did see on that pace projector and finish projector, the number 7 Wet Paint does get that LP flag, indicating that she has the best TimeformUS late pace rating in the field. And that could be critical in this 9 furlong test if the pace does heat up front. And speaking of Wet Paint, Craig, let's dive into the contenders, beginning with her, the 5-2 morning line favorite. And here she is winning her final prep in the Grade 3 Fantasy. This was her 3rd stakes victory in a row at Oaklawn through the winter and spring. And they've all looked pretty similar, Craig. She makes this big run from off the pace, puts the field away, wins going away at the end by open lengths. She's going to face a tougher field here, but I'm not sure how much tougher it's really getting.
No, I mean, she's obviously very good on dirt. She's won all 4 starts, all of them around 2 turns. She's won them by open lengths. I brought up before on our various podcasts when we recap the races and even when we handicap them, I'm not sure she's a filly that's best judged by speed figures, given her late running style. She just seems to run to the competition. And so far, there hasn't been a whole lot of it for her. So she's certainly a horse I'm not eager to bet strongly against. I probably will, as we'll get to in the end, just because she doesn't have those gaudy speed figures. But I'm not going to be surprised with a good setup and a fast pace if she takes a healthy jump here.
I think my biggest knock against her is that she is a deep closer who's going to be a short price in a 14-horse field. So there's always the risk of a horse like this encountering some traffic trouble. She's been pretty lucky in her Oaklawn races so far, being able to work out trips. And I say lucky, she's also helped herself by having the acceleration to go through some holes. But we'll see if she's able to work out the right kind of trip in this large field in the Kentucky Oaks. The other Brad Cox trainee in this race that's going to take a lot of money is the number 6 Botanical. And she is also coming in off a win streak, actually 4 victories in a row, but all of those wins have been earned over the synthetic course at Turfway Park. And she's run some pretty nice speed figures in those races, particularly last time in that Bourbonnais Oaks, when she earned the best speed figure by far of anybody in this field, leading early before drawing away at the end from another rival who's pretty talented from the Brad Cox stable. Some big gaps behind her in that race, which kind of bolsters the idea that that was a fast race. The big question here, Craig, is can she handle the dirt?
Yeah, that is the question, because if those last races had been on dirt, she would probably be the favorite in here with that lofty speed figure. It's definitely a question mark, but I like this filly, the way she's shown some versatility. We've seen her win on the lead. We've seen her win off the pace. Not far. She was sitting third in that prep for the last out, but she was able to sit well off of it and close. She's adapted to fast pace, slow pace. So I do think there's a lot to like with Botanical, given other than that obvious question mark.
Yeah, she's a tough call for me. Based on pedigree, Medaglia d'Oro, obviously a versatile influence that gets both dirt and turf horses. Kind of similar thing on the dam side. Her dam did win the Grade 3 Tempted on dirt as a 2-year-old, but the pedigree really could go either way, and Brad Cox did start her on turf. It's actually funny, Brad Cox started both Wet Paint and Botanical on the turf. Wet Paint obviously has proven to be a good dirt horse. Botanical has not quite done that yet, but we'll see if she's able to make that transition in the Kentucky Oaks. Another horse coming off a final round prep win is the number 4 South Lawn, and she was the upset winner of the Fairgrounds Oaks back in late March. And, Craig, she's a horse that was very visually impressive when she came back off the layoff as a 3-year-old, winning that allowance race at Fairgrounds. And she proved that improvement was no fluke last time out by beating a decent field, again, in decisive fashion in that Fairgrounds Oaks. Like the others, she's taking a step up in class here, but I do like that she's got that tactical speed.
Yeah, and I mean, she's won 3 out of 4 by very open lengths, similar to Wet Paint. When she wins easily. And I liked what I saw from the Fairgrounds. The only disappointing thing was that speed figure. It didn't really progress, but given her style, it's possible that, maybe she has another forward jump in her.
Yeah, Craig, I guess my one comment about the speed figures would be, while 102 does seem pretty slow for a race like the Kentucky Oaks, if you take Botanical out of the equation, those 102 numbers are just 5 points below the numbers that Wet Paint has been running, and she's the fastest dirt horse on the way into this race. So I'm not going to worry too much about her speed figures. She just strikes me as one that's not going to have any problem handling the 9 furlongs. The Norm Cassie barn has been firing on all cylinders all year, and I just feel like she's a very logical player in this race. And frankly, I think she's great value if she is indeed that 8-1 morning line price. A couple others coming out of the Fairgrounds Oaks include the number 14 Pretty Mischievous. She ran okay in that race, Craig. Just didn't quite see out the last furlong when she got passed by South Lawn. She had run well in her prior start when she won the Rachel Alexandra, but that's a race that has not come back particularly strong, even though it got a slightly higher speed figure, and she's going to have to overcome this far outside post.
Yeah, it's not a great post, and I didn't like the regression that I saw from her last time. She really didn't have an excuse to regress. Like she had a little bit of problem at the start, but not enough for a 6 point decline, in my opinion. Not really what you want to see from a 3-year-old. I was lukewarm on her at best, and the post kind of sent me to the other side.
Yeah, she's one that I feel might not be getting better with added distance, but I could also see her drifting up from that 10-1 morning line, so maybe that could get you a little more interested in her. The number 2, the Alice look, is also coming out of the Fairgrounds Oaks. She finished a little further behind South Lawn and Pretty Mischievous in third that day, beaten 7 lengths. I will say, Craig, I didn't love the trip that she got that day. I know it was a small field, but she was just sort of the one that was outside in no man's land for much of that race, lost more ground on the turns, and just seemed like she disengaged a little bit at the top of the stretch. She had run much better in her prior start, the Silver Bullet Day, and I know we have some doubts about that speed figure, but at the end of the day, she still ran a 108.2 back, which would make her one of the fastest dirt horses in this field.
Yeah, it's just a matter of how much you trust that figure, and if you give her an excuse for last race. I do give her a bit of an excuse. I considered using her in here. The wide trip was not good. She was obviously lost lengths on both of the turns. So if there's one horse I could kind of put a line through the last race that we're going to talk about, it would be her.
Yeah, and given that we don't know who's going to be forward, I guess outside of Flying Connection, she's one drawing the 2 posts that I could see getting a more aggressive ride. And it is worth noting her 2 best races when she won so impressively, 4 back, and then that Silver Bullet Day victory when she was more on the engine and ridden up closer to the pace. So we'll see what kind of trip the Alice look gets. Move on to another prep race, the Ashland from Keeneland, which was won by the number 11 Defining Purpose. Let's take a look at the stretch run of that race. And this was a pretty big upset. She went off at 20-1 this day. The trip definitely had something to do with the result because she got a very nice, comfortable journey, just stalking outside of a moderate pace. But she still beat some nice horses here, including a couple that were entered for this race.
Yeah, she comes out of races at Oaklawn, at least one where she wasn't able to handle wet paint. I'm not going to judge that and just say that she can't beat wet paint because I thought she took a very nice jump forward with the speed figures in here. I think she had a bit of an excuse back in the Honeybee when she lost on the sloppy track. Didn't really appear to love that. And if you just look at her last 2 fast track races, they're very good. So if it was a fast track on Friday, I would definitely want to give her an upgrade.
Yeah, my first inclination is to say that she was a last time was the time horse. If you missed the boat at 20-1, do you really want to take her in this race? But I don't think she's going to be that sort of price once again. So I could understand making the case for a horse like Defining Purpose. Another horse coming out of the Ashland is the number 5 Wonder Wheel. And Craig, she's got to turn things around because she was a very good 2-year-old, although we do have some doubts about how good that Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies was in retrospect. We just haven't seen a whole lot of success out of that race. She lost her first start off the layoff this year as the heavy favorite in the Suncoast, and then really took a step backwards last time in the Ashland when she didn't get the most aggressive ride, and just feels like she's lost the early speed that she once had, and it definitely has not helped the results.
No, it hasn't. I mean, I kind of praised her after that Juvenile Fillies, the way she adapted, going wire to wire to near the back of the pack and winning. But as you say, she hasn't progressed at all, and the speed figures haven't been there. And I'll just say it, I'm not even on the fence. The Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies was a very, very weak race for the class. And I think she was just the best of a bad lot, and I don't want any parts of her in here.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you about that. There are some bigger prices in this race that might be heading in the right direction, and one of those could be Affirmative Lady, who just is coming out of a victory in the Gulfstream Park Oaks last time. She was a mild upset winner this day, going off at 8-1. Also in this race is Darth Vader, who's actually taking over right now and looks briefly like Darth Vader is going to win this race, but she kind of hits the wall at the end. And Affirmative Lady, Craig, at least she's a horse that feels like is not going to have any problem with the distance. She runs like one that really will stay a mile or an eighth and perhaps beyond later in the year. She just has to get faster on the speed figure scale.
Yeah, she did take a nice healthy jump last time, but she's going to need another win. Probably my biggest concern with Affirmative Lady is the race she's coming out of, the Gulfstream Park Oaks, which this has not been a very good predictor of success in the Kentucky Oaks. I was looking through the charts, and it's been quite a while since a horse from this race has even hit the board at Churchill. So for me, this race is just one I'm not too interested in the horses coming out of it.
Yeah, I tend to agree. That was not one of the stronger preps, so we probably are not too high on the number 12 Dorth Vader either, although she has run some nice speed figures in the past, Craig, in one-turn races. Just based on the optics last time, it's hard to see her getting a mile and an eighth.
No, I believe we previewed that race, and I like Dorth Vader in there. And turning for home, she looked like a winner. I thought she was going to draw away, and she just kind of threw in the towel and had all the looks of a horse who wants no parts of two turns, particularly a mile and an eighth.
Now, another horse that might be in great form right now and is moving in the right direction is the number 8, Promise Her America. Let's take a look at her upset victory last time out in the Gazelle, and she was a big price this day, going off at 26-1, the longest price in this 6-horse field. And yes, she got a great trip to win. She was just sitting outside of a pretty moderate pace. But, Craig, I like the way that she digs in here in the final furlong and is able to hold off the closing Gambling Girl. This is a horse, like we talked about prior to the Gazelle, has improved in every single start of her career. So is it impossible that she improves again?
No, and as we've talked about, it wouldn't have to be a huge jump because everybody else is kind of running similar speed figures, maybe just a couple points higher. So I don't think the distance will be a problem for her, given the breeding and the running style that she had. And I wouldn't blame anyone that wanted to use her on their tickets at what's going to be a gigantic price.
Yeah, and the other horse coming out of the Gazelle is the number 3, Gambling Girl. Arguably, she was a little against the pace that day. You see some of those blue color-coded TimeformUS pace figures, and she was finishing best of all at the end. Another one that feels like she'll be helped by the mile and an eighth distance, Craig, but when you're talking about any closer in this race, I think you have to ask the question, can they outclose Wet Paint?
Yeah, that would be the big question for her. I actually like her best out of this race. You can see we even gave her a slightly higher speed figure because of closing into that slow pace and getting so close to winning behind Promise Her America. I don't know if she can outkick Wet Paint to the wire, but I do think she's going to be coming in the lane, and it's one to use in exotics.
Just to cover them all, let's briefly run through some of the biggest prices in this race. The number 1 is Mimi Kikuchi. She is a Dubai-based filly who's coming over for her first start in the U.S. Craig, I just didn't think a whole lot of the competition that she was beating over in the United Arab Emirates.
No, I didn't either. I made my own speed figures for this race. We can see the time form ratings are pretty low. And unlike the Kentucky Derby, which we'll talk about in a different preview, this one did come back pretty slow on my figures as well. So I'm not interested in Mimi Kikuchi.
The number 9 is And Tell Me No Lie. She is the California shipper in this race, and kind of like Wonder Wheel, Craig, she's a horse that did some nice things as a 2-year-old, has gotten marginally faster since then, but I'm not sure how strong some of those California preps were, and she's another one who's just a little bit of a plodder, and I don't see her out closing Wet Paint in this race.
No, I mean, she's okay. Unfortunately, the horse that's beat her to the last couple of times, Feza, isn't going to be able to be here because she's trained by Bob Baffert. But she was pretty dominant. It seems like to me, And Tell Me No Lies was just picking up the pieces behind a runaway winner.
And finally, we'll mention that likely pace setter, the number 10, Flying Connection. I mean, Craig, based purely on the TimeformUS data, I mean, I guess she's not impossible here. She earned a competitive speed figure last time in the Sunland Park Oaks. I just want to see her do it against a real competition because those were not the strongest races.
Yeah, she's probably going to be on the front end, and she's going to be by herself. I wouldn't blame anyone for taking a flyer. If I was playing a pick 4 or pick 5, I would probably use her as a C-type just in case maybe she is really that good. We've seen horses come in from lesser circuits and win on the big stage before. This one, I mean, she wouldn't be my top pick, but I wouldn't totally dismiss her just because of that speed that she has.
Well, let's throw up our picks for this Kentucky Oaks, Greg. And I think we both respect Wet Paint in this race. We each have her second. She is the horse to beat, the most likely winner. But she's got to work out a trip from far back in the pack. And I know we're both interested in some horses that could be a little bit more forwardly placed. You have faith that Botanical can transfer that form from synth to dirt.
Yeah, I've been watching a lot of the races at Churchill and Keeneland the last couple meet, and many horses have come from the synthetic at Turfway to be able to win dirt races at both of those tracks. I think Botanical has the breeding, and I think you summed it up best with Wet Paint. She's a deep closer in a big field at a short price, and she could very well win the race, but it's never a gamble I'm going to want to make.
Yeah, and you do have the number 3 Gambling Girl in there as a horse that's double digits on the morning line. I think you want to be aware of some horses that you do want to include at prices in this race because, as we talked about, mentioning every contender, a lot of them have things to like in this Kentucky Oaks. I landed on the number 4 South Lawn, who I just think has really progressed this winter, supposed to get the right kind of trip in this race. I think the 9 furlongs works for her, and if she's anywhere near that 8-1 morning line, I think that's great value on her. I'd even take probably as low as 9-2 or 5-1 on South Lawn, and some of the prices all include are horses like the number 2, the Alice Look, and the number 8, Promise Her America. But I think it's definitely a race where you want to keep an open mind. So that's a look at the Kentucky Oaks on Friday at Churchill Downs. Good luck if you're playing the races this weekend.